Hello and welcome to the show. This week's Fail Race versus the community. We were to go racing with B-Class cars fitted with the Turbo Rally engine. Our first race was at the Watkins Glen circuit. One car struggled to get off the line. That is one of the dangers with these cars and these engines. If you haven't quite gearbox right, haven't quite got your starting sorted, you can stall the cars. On the most part though, everybody did get off the line well. As we come through the S's for the first time, it's too wide further up. It is a scary place to be going side by side very, very fast indeed. This Evo 6 was out dragging the competition down towards the chicane, tries to get to the inside of a Neon, can't quite keep his car there, just too many vehicles trying to fit into a small space. However, the Dodge can't get turned through the next section. That would put the Evo up into second place, and up ahead Lancia 037 was struggling, as does the Evo with understeer. Quite a few cars were having understeer issues, especially at that corner when you're not quite got the tyres up to temperature, not quite expecting it. The 037 though much faster in a straight, and while yes, all of these cars were using the same engines, some cars were far lighter than others. The 037 would be a really rather light vehicle. Equally, there are different stages of engine restrictor. Some cars, to keep them in B class, weren't able to remove the restrictors. Other ones would have gone for the restrictors off. So yeah, it did make for an interesting build, certainly, to get these cars to work. One very, very fast vehicle, a Fiat, was trying to make his way up through the order. The engine is a difficult one to work with. It has a rather wonky power band. I say wonky power band. You've got to make sure you're changing about 5,500 RPM, 6,000 at the very, very latest. Otherwise, you get very little power high up. It is an incredibly torquey engine. Certainly in a front-wheel drive car, they are a real handful to drive. Rear-wheel drive cars can be a little tricky at times as well. This Fiat though was making it look easy, sweeping around the outside of the Dodge. The Renault 5 was trying to come with him, but pushed his luck a little too hard around the final corner, ended up in the wall. Yeah, the Fiat was making some impressive passes and climbing up through the order. Further back, there was still some good close racing going on. This Opel had spotted an opportunity to try and get a move done on the Renault 5. The Renault a little bit slow off of the first corner. However, the Renault wasn't giving up as we're going too wide through the uphill S's. As I said, one of the scarier points on the track here, to be going too wide. Very, very fast indeed up there. Lots of cars flat out, if not quite flat out. It would be very, very close depending on what levels of grip you had going on in your vehicle. The Opel, a little slower than the Renault in a straight line, was coming under threat from the Honda now as we go through the chicane. And then the next big problem area, or potential problem area, certainly this very, very long corner. A lot of cars have been four-wheel drive swapped, so a lot of cars were struggling with their excess understeer through that section. The Opel gets a much better run as the Renault found himself out in trouble across the curbs. The Opel to the inside for the next corner. Watkins can be a bit of a tougher track to overtake on. Lots of kind of medium speed corners. They're not necessarily huge braking zones, so yeah, it can be a little bit of a pain to overtake sometimes, but people were finding ways past. The Fiat continued its march up through the order, catching up to the back of the Evo 6, while the Lancia up ahead was gradually building a lead. The big advantage of the Fiat being so much lighter than everything else around. It did have some very, very good acceleration, very good top speed, managing to get the move done before they came through the chicane here. However, the Mitsubishi was not giving up. Come around the next very long corner, the Evo tries to stick his nose up the inside, just can't quite make it stick as a backmarker keeps his car out of the way. The Evo does just about get alongside on the exit of the corner, but is no match for the Fiat's straight line speed. Further back, and the mid-pack was really rather busy this time out, as a Mercedes 190E trying to make progress gets to the inside of a Focus on the run down towards turn 1. As I said, Watkins can at times be a little bit of an awkward track for overtaking, but that certainly wasn't hampering the efforts going on in this race, as the Mercedes gets the pass done on the Focus, as Escort was having trouble getting his car turned through the first corner. The Focus could make the most of the opportunity and would repass the Mercedes on the run through the S's, but the 190E little bit better run off the top of the course, had a bit more straight line speed, was able to get the position back from the Focus and would be able to cover as they come through the next corner. Renault 5 was now fighting with the Escort. There was quite a lot going on at this stage in the race. Unfortunately, more replay troubles would befall us. This time, the replay would cut out with a few laps to go, and no idea why in particular. On this one, we didn't have horrendous lag problems or anything. It wasn't a particularly or any longer race than we normally do. For whatever reason, it cuts out, and it did for everybody. So, yeah, a little bit of a shame. At the front, the Lancia 037 would go on to take victory. He was getting caught by the Fiat, but a mistake from the Fiat towards the end would drop him back, and he ran out of laps to find a way past the Lancia. Yeah, for whatever reason, the Forza replays are not being particularly happy with me when it comes to SQC. Unfortunately, yeah, not entirely sure on that one. However, Race 2 replay did actually save this time out, which I guess is an improvement. Again, another couple of cars having issues getting off the line this time as we go racing at the Nürburgring GP circuit. Fortunately, they were right at the very back, so they don't actually affect anyone else around. I was driving a Celica. I had a very quiet opening race. I'd never built a good Celica beforehand, and I was hoping that this one would work out. It's a very mediocre car at Watkins Glen. However, a good start at Nürburgring. I was relatively low down the order, but hugging the inside at turn 1 had worked to keep me out of trouble, and I was continuing to make some progress up through the field. My car had been built with all the restrictors removed. I had as much power as I possibly could. However, that did mean that I didn't quite have as much grip as some of the other vehicles. However, the Celica, as I said, made a very, very good start here at Nürburgring, and I was hoping that could make amends for a relatively lackluster Watkins Glen. Further back, and there was all manner of busyness going on. This Evo 10, having been one of the cars stalled off the line, had worked himself back up into contention, fighting with a Scirocco. Goes around the outside. That is a very, very impressive manoeuvre to make that one stick. The Scirocco does try coming back through the next corner, but it is a little bit too far back at this stage. Up ahead, an Alpine is having a go at the back of a Subaru. The Scirocco got some great straight line speed coming down here. The Evo goes across to cover. I think it was a Civic was also absolutely flying. Indeed, it is a Civic's on the outside of the Scirocco as we come into the chicane. I think the Scirocco and Civic just tangle ever so slightly enough to slow each other down. The Evo gets off lightly, but for this particular race, we were having another quick stop one, so one mandatory pit stop for everybody. A whole heap of cars dive into the pits on the opening lap to try and get their pit stop out of the way. And much as we saw last time out at Lime Rock, yes, if you are like the only car to pit on the opening lap, it can be an advantageous strategy. You get your pit early, get it out of the way, and then you come back out in clean air. But too many cars did that on the first lap for it to work like that. Lots of cars diving into the pits meant they'd come out and still be stuck in traffic. Cars that didn't pit early on were, well, I mean, you still could end up with traffic, as this Golf was making his way through the order very, very quick in a straight line. This Golf easily breezing past the Eagle Talon, although had a little bit more trouble holding it off through the corners. Again, though, gets it out of the turn, and there was some very, very impressive turn of pace from the Volkswagen. The Alpine was continuing to find himself in battles. The little Renault would not have the greatest straight line speed, but being so light, and it was incredibly good through the corners. I'm guessing very much a handling build with this one. Yeah, was finding cars to go racing with a fair way back from the Prelude as they head down this next straight, but can brake so much later than the Honda. The Alpine having a big dive up the inside, doesn't quite, I don't think the Honda was quite expecting it through there. The Alpine ends up sort of a little too tight to the inside of the corner, but again can carry good speed around the inside of the turn. The Prelude can't do anything about the Renault as it heads down towards the hairpin, and the Alpine would get the position for that little battle. The cars that had pitted early on, whether it be on lap 1 or lap 2, as I said, they all kind of came back out and were then causing trouble for one another. This Eagle Talon, a quick car, was finding himself having to battle through the pack, gets to the inside of the Evo 10, exactly as we had seen last time out with the Alpine, not quite being able to get the move done, just forced to take too tighter a line and couldn't make it stick, although the Evo was slowed down by a Fiat. The Fiat with monumental straight line speed, but an absolute handful through the corners. Yeah, the Eagle Talon would make the most of the opportunity that presented itself, and the Fiat would then end up just running a bit too wide through the hairpin and then letting everyone go past. Now, I had been running towards the front. I'd stayed out, and I'd been running in relatively clean air, pitted towards the end of the race, was hoping that I could potentially leapfrog the leader, or at least get a little bit closer through my pit stops. Third and fourth would also follow my strategy of coming in towards the very end of the race. It hadn't quite worked out for me. I'd got closer, certainly, to the Golf that was leading the way. I hadn't got ahead of him, but it meant that I would have to really charge for the final couple of laps if I wanted to get close to him. The battle for third place was also hotting up. The Subaru Impreza, the best of the cars that had pitted very early on, had worked his way to fourth and was looking for a way past the Golf up ahead, and these two would remain close for the final couple of laps. The last car to pit was the Focus that you see just leaving the pits now, was hoping to join in this battle, just couldn't quite get it stopped at the first corner and would lose the place to the couple of vehicles here. Yeah, the pit stop, I certainly like having the pit stop strategy play a part in all of this. It does make the races a little bit more interesting, got a little bit more to think about. The Focus tried to get to the inside of the Impreza, just didn't quite have the speed of these two vehicles. The two Eagle Talons managed to find one another to have a fight, again, towards the end of this race. I quite like the Eagle Talons. They're often quite a little bit of a forgotten car sometimes when it comes to Forza. They were certainly relatively fast, but again, as I said at the start, they'd gone for the pit early strategy, and everybody had ended up in traffic back here. You can see a relatively large group of vehicles fighting one another. Just hadn't quite worked out for them, really. The blue and yellow car here looking for a way past, just couldn't quite make a manoeuvre. Sticks going for a long, long way around. That is a tough place to go around the outside of another car, and he almost makes the move stick. Unfortunately, you're always going to be stuck on the outside when you come down towards the hairpin, and that's another place that going around the outside is a hell of a tough job to do, especially with very, very similar cars. And they've both got to be careful. There was a Hyundai right behind them, ready to pick up the pieces should anything go wrong between them, but the white car could just about keep his nose ahead at the front, and I was flying towards the end of the race. My Celica much better suited to the Nürburgring circuit than it had been at Watkins Glen. I'd caught up right to the back of the Golf, but was running out of places to make a move stick as we head down towards the chicane for the final time. I was closing, but I wasn't really going to be close enough. The Golf just runs a little bit too wide through the chicane, but there's nowhere for me to put the Celica, and the Volkswagen had fantastic drive off of the corner. He could defend going up towards the final turn, and yeah, I was never likely to be able to make a move. I didn't have enough grip to go around the outside of the Golf. I tried to cut back to the inside. He just parks the Volkswagen on the apex. There's nothing I could do. Got as good a run out of the final corner as I could. I was catching, but it wasn't going to be enough. The Volkswagen would take victory. My Toyota in second, with the Golf in third. A good race for the Volkswagens there at Nürburgring. Our third and final race, we would head to the Bugatti circuit. Certainly not one of my favourite circuits, but it's a track that we hadn't been around for a while, so I thought we should go to somewhere a little bit different. Well, I guess it's kind of turn 2 is a little bit of a problematic corner, certainly, as I think a little bit of lag put an Opel around further back. There was a fair amount of chaos, though, in the mid-pack, which is a shame, really. We've done relatively well with these, what are relatively difficult cars and quite awkward cars to drive, or certainly awkward engines to drive with. But yeah, the start of this race didn't quite go to plan. The front cars, though, did make it through cleanly. This Datsun was trying to get a move done on an Alpine, but couldn't quite make anything stick, and certainly with what I would assume is a rear-wheel drive Datsun, judging by the amount of wheel spin coming out of that corner. Yeah, the rear-wheel drive cars could at times be a little bit awkward to deploy all of the power. I had started further down, and while my car had survived in one piece, I had a fair amount of ground to make up as I was watching a Lancia up ahead get to move on an Impreza. I was keen to follow through. The Subaru, having been put out of position ever so slightly coming through that chicane, left it vulnerable on the exit, and certainly at this stage of the race, you got to make up the positions as soon as you see the opportunities. And yeah, the Celica would do me proud. Good acceleration on the Toyota, despite being one of the probably slightly heavier cars in all of this. It did have some really good acceleration off of the corners, you know, being that more powerful. And if I could get a nice straight run off of the turn, as you saw there, I could, yeah, really fly the car down the straights. In third place was a Volkswagen Scirocco that was creating a little bit of a train behind him as he was busy defending from the cars. But in fact, actually second place at this stage of the race. The Sunbeam Tiger was looking for a way past. The Datsun had an issue with a curb and dropped back into this group, and there was plenty more of us all lining up to try and find a way past the Volkswagen, but it was doing a good enough job at keeping the vehicles behind. The Datsun gets to the inside of the Sunbeam as they have to fight their way through the chicane. I think the Sunbeam got knocked off through that very fast section. Behind, we had an Eagle Talon fighting with a Nissan IDX. The Lancia was coming to join in. I was catching to the back of this group as well. The Sunbeam goes around the outside of the Volkswagen, an impressive manoeuvre on that particular corner as well. As we head towards the final turn, you've got to be careful of the curbs around here. The kind of little yellow sausage curbs at this track are absolutely nightmare stuff that can cause a lot of problems with your car getting sort of stuck on them. I was fighting with the Lancia, and this would be a race-long battle between me and the 037. I'd get myself to the inside for one corner, but that does give the Lancia the advantage through the next turn. The Lancia, however, was struggling with quite a lot of oversteer, and a big slide would promote me up a position. Although having just got that position, I was coming under threat from the Eagle Talon. The Eagle having a look up the inside around that final corner, but there was a couple of places I could get the Celica off of the corners really quickly, that final corner being one of them, which yeah, was making it difficult for cars to get past me further back. And there was once more good fighting going on in the midfield. This Hyundai, the Velocitas were actually faring much better than I was expecting them to. I'm presuming four-wheel drive converted. As I said, you just won't be competitive with a front-wheel drive car. But yeah, the Velocita, another car that tends not to get used a huge amount in Forza, they were doing relatively well. Yes, pass done on a Celica through that particular corner. The Celica was struggling a little bit out here, but yeah, good move from the Hyundai, and it was good to see. Quite like the Velocity. It's good to see them doing well. As I said, I continued to fight with the Lancia. This would become the battle for third place after the Datsun had an argument with the curb that it's very much lost. The Sunbeam Tiger was too far up ahead, and once we started fighting like this, there was nothing we were going to be able to do about chasing down the Sunbeam. The Lancia, the better handling of the two cars here, but my Toyota a little bit faster off of the corners. Lancia trying to get around the outside, but isn't quite able to make that move work. Once more, I'm having to go defensive, and as soon as you're starting, having to defend so heavily through these corners, you're always likely to slow yourself down. Fortunately, we were far enough ahead of the cars behind the Lancia, just struggling too much with oversteer to really get a move to work on my Celica. At the front though, and it was the Alpine that would go on to take a victory here. It was looking like it was going to be kind of close race at one point. As I said, the Datsun was an incredibly fast car, but fell foul of the nasty curbs around this track, which the Alpine would not have issues with. So the Renault would go on to take victory with a Sunbeam Tiger claiming second, my Celica in third. My Toyota actually fared quite a lot. It was pretty damn awful at Watkins Glen. It really wasn't particularly competitive. I thought I'd built yet another duff Celica, but it turned out once we'd got it to other tracks, yeah, it was are much better suited cars. These Turbo Rally engines are very awkward engines to work with. Certainly won't be for everyone. I quite like that. If you get things right with them, you can get very, very fast cars. If you get things wrong with them, though, you get absolute dogs that are not nice vehicles to drive. They, certainly make for an interesting experience trying to build a car with them and race vehicles with these rather unique engines. However, that is it for this week's Versus the Community. The next one shall be held on Thursday, the 16th of June. We are going to go racing with classic American cars in C-Class. These are vehicles made in 1980 or earlier. If you would like to sign up and take part in this, then you can via our forums. There will be a link in the description. Find the Ferraris Versus the Community section, and you can sign up in there. But that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.